Playing tennis with someone is a great way to get to know them better. Usually, if a person behaves like a gentleman on the court, then he is the same in life. On the other hand, I saw one guy at his worst as an athlete while playing with his best friend. Later, I was not surprised when I learned that this guy left his family and ran away with another man's wife. Now I'll tell you about Frank Calhoun. Frank is a big guy. He played football at Georgia Tech until he injured his knee. After surgery, he switched to tennis, but he plays the same way he plays soccer. Powerful serves and hitting the ball so hard that it flies toward the net from the service line. But I can beat him. I like to go to the net and make him miss. He often kicks the ball over the baseline. And let's not forget about his questionable decisions on the line. Let's just say that he counts all the contested balls for himself. Because of this, Frank always wants to play with me. He can't bear to lose to the little guy. Although I'm not that small, I'm 6 feet tall. But compared to Frank, who is 3 inches taller and 75 pounds heavier, I look skinny. Unsurprisingly, I'm not particularly keen on playing with Frank, but it's hard to avoid him because we both live in Eden Point, north of Atlanta. Atlanta is a tennis-crazed city, and our community is built around a clubhouse with a pool and multiple tennis courts. There are so many people here playing in the Atlanta Lawn Tennis Association that it's almost impossible to avoid Frank. But the good news is that I get to play with a lot of really nice people, like my mixed doubles partner, Penny Pennington. I met Penny through my wife, Melanie. Melanie is a Pilates instructor, and many Eden Point residents visit her studio, including Penny. Unfortunately, Melanie doesn't like tennis, but when she found out that Penny was looking for a partner, she introduced us, and for a year now we've been together. Penny plays together. Today's match was at a club located in Stone Mountain, and I offered to give Penny a ride to save gas. Given how heavy the traffic is on Saturdays, we decided to leave 45 minutes before kickoff. When she left the house, I again wondered why Penny was still alone. Part of this is because she lost her husband in a car accident 3 years ago. After a long period of mourning, one way to cope with grief was to join Melanie's Pilates class. Another way was to return to tennis, which she played in school. As a result of all these physical activities, she turned into a slender, fit, dark-haired woman in her early 30s. I would expect a woman as beautiful as Penny to attract suitors the way honey attracts flies. But she constantly tells Melanie that she simply hasn't found the right man. "Hello, Penny," I greeted her as she got into my car. "Ready to break them today?" She smiled at me. "Of course, Michael. I've been waiting for a rematch with these guys for a long time." We were discussing our strategy for the match when my phone rang. "Hi, Robert. Are you kidding? No, everything is perfect here. Crap. Okay, let's reschedule the match." Penny looked at me questioningly as I took the next exit and headed back home. "It was our opponent," I explained to her. "He said that a rainstorm had recently passed through their court, and now it was impossible to play. Atlanta is known for its localized downpours, which can drench one part of the city while the sun shines brightly in another." Penny was clearly disappointed. "Damn, I was so looking forward to playing today." "Look," I said, "why don't we go back to the club? We can practice, and maybe there will be people who want to play." As I entered the main gate of Eden Point, I turned onto the road to my home. "I need to stop by and pick up the check for the club dues for this quarter," I told Penny. "I won't be late." I parked at the curb and rushed to the front door. I wrote out the check last night and left it on the dresser so I knew where to find it. But as I walked down the hallway, I heard sounds coming from the bedroom that I shouldn't have heard. It was Melanie's voice. What the hell? I crept to the door and looked inside. Melanie had sex with a man. I felt like I had been in an accident. I was shocked. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Everything suddenly changed, and I couldn't understand what was happening. No, this can't be true, I thought when I recognized the figure of Frank Calhoun. I stepped back from the door as if I had been hit. It was too hard. My first instinct was to rush into the room and attack him. But what difference will it make? I asked myself desperately. They have already cheated on me. Fighting him won't change anything. Besides, even if I throw the first blow, he will still beat me since he is much bigger. But I don't want him to get away with it. Suddenly, I remembered that Penny was waiting for me in the car. Damn, I need to take her home first, and then come back and deal with this, I thought. I left the house in a state of shock. I could throw up at any moment. I saw Penny looking at me through the car window. A moment later, I got behind the wheel and started the engine. I don't know what I looked like, but it certainly wasn't good. "Are you okay, Michael?" Penny asked anxiously, looking at me. I couldn't speak. I gripped the steering wheel tightly and steered the car towards Penny's house. When I stopped, I shifted the gear into park and, without looking at her, said, "Sorry, Penny, but I won't be able to play today." "What happened, Michael? What happened?" she asked with growing concern. When I didn't answer, she got out of the car, walked around it, and opened my door. "You're not going anywhere until you tell me what happened." Robotically, I got out of the car and let her take me to her house. She disappeared for a while and returned with a glass of ice water. I automatically took a couple of sips while she watched. When I put the glass down, she took my hand and squeezed it. "Tell me, Michael, what happened?" Suddenly, all my strength left me and I sank onto the sofa. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened again, so I took another sip of water. "It was Melanie and Frank," I said in a tense voice. She looked at me blankly. "Go on," she said. "They were there together in our bedroom. They—" My voice trailed off. She gasped. "No, this can't be true. Melanie would never do that." The image of the two of them resurfaced in my memory, and I felt a tear roll down my cheek. "I thought so too," I whispered, feeling a pain in my throat. "Maybe it was something else, Michael. Maybe you were mistaken," she asked. I knew she was trying to help, but that didn't stop my rage. I saw sex in the process. "So tell me, Penny, am I wrong?" She winced at my sarcasm. "Sorry, Michael. I didn't doubt you. I just hoped there might be another explanation." Pain shot through me again. And it was Frank Calhoun, damn it. How could she let this big baboon get close to her? "I guess that explains why Frank started taking Melanie's Pilates classes," Penny mused. "Did he go to her classes?" I exploded. "She didn't tell me about it." My anger continued to grow. "Thank you very much for the warning," I said bitterly. Penny was offended. "It's not fair, Michael. I didn't know anything was going on between them." "Sorry, Penny," I said. "I didn't want to take it out on you. I'm just on edge right now." She squeezed my hand. "It's okay, Michael. I can only imagine how hard it is for you right now." I woke up. "I have to go," I told her. "I need to go back and find out what's really going on." "You're not going to do anything violent, Michael?" "No, I just need answers." She squeezed my hand. "Please let me know what happens, Michael, and tell me if there's anything I can do to help." I thanked her and returned to my car. On the way home, I was terrified of what awaited me. I thought of all the questions I wanted to ask her and tried to predict her reaction. I expected tears, denial, and angry words. How should I react to this? And what about Frank? What if he's still there? I could feel the adrenaline pulsing through my system. When I came through the kitchen door, Melanie must have heard me because she came out to meet me. She was wearing a robe and her hair was wrapped in a towel. "You're back early," she said with a smile. "How was the match?" "We didn't play. The rain got in the way," I said briefly. "It's a shame you couldn't play," she said. I think Penny was disappointed. I just looked at her. I didn't want to make small talk. "They called about the rain right after we left," I said quietly. She blinked, but her expression did not change. "I'm back home," I told her. My heart started beating faster. "I saw you and Frank together." Of the many scenarios I imagined, Melanie's reaction was not what I expected. "I'm sorry you saw that," she said calmly. "Is that all you have to say?" I asked in amazement. "You're cheating on me and you're sorry I saw it? You're not even going to apologize for having sex with him? How long does this last?" Do you have any explanation? She crossed her arms and sighed. Sit down, Michael, she said, pointing to the table in the breakfast nook. I prefer to stand, I said angrily. As you wish, she said and sat down. I stood there, stunned by her complete lack of reaction. Listen, Michael, we were going to tell you soon, but I think this is just speeding up the process. I'm leaving you. Frank and I love each other, and I'm moving in with him. We will get married as soon as the divorce is finalized. I decided to sit down. I didn't want to risk falling. Before I could say anything, she jumped up and said, "Wait here," before disappearing towards our bedroom. A few moments later, she returned, holding a stack of papers. She handed them to me. "It doesn't have to be a fight," she said. "I don't want any child support. I took all the money out of our savings account, but it's only fair since I'm leaving you the house. It's a lot better than what you'll get if we go to court, but I'll agree to it as long as you sign the papers and let us all get on with our lives." I looked at the stack of papers. It was a divorce application. "Have you seen a lawyer yet?" I asked in amazement. "What about our marriage? What happened to the last 10 years we spent together?" "Sorry, Michael. It wasn't something planned. It just happened. Just accept it. It is what it is." "Accept?" I shouted. "Accept that my beloved wife is sleeping with that bastard Frank Calhoun in our own bed? Accept that our marriage ended like this?" She stood up. "You disappoint me, Michael. I was hoping for a more mature reaction from you." She turned and walked back to the bedroom. I sat at the table, staring at the divorce petition in front of me, trying to understand what was going on. If someone had asked me this morning, I would have said that I love my wife and that we have a good marriage. That day, I found out that she was leaving me for another man. Complete cognitive dissonance. In the silence, I heard a cell phone signal and then snippets of conversation. He saw us. About as expected. That would be good. When she returned, she was fully dressed and carrying a travel bag and a set of cosmetics. "Now that you've put the question bluntly, I'm not going to stay here tonight. Frank will come for me. We'll come back on Monday while you're at work and pick up the rest of your things." "So you're leaving just like that?" "That's the way it should be," she said. "Okay," I said bitterly. "What should I tell our friends?" She sighed. "Listen, Michael, Frank and I haven't done anything wrong, and we're not going to hide like criminals. We will continue to actively participate in public life. In fact, we'll probably go to the reception at Eden Point tomorrow night. You won't have to explain anything to anyone because everyone will already know." At this moment, a car horn sounded outside. Melanie looked out the window. "Frank is here," she said. "I'm leaving." As she closed the door, she turned around and looked at me. "Just sign the papers, Michael. The sooner you do this, the better it will be for all of us." Then she left. I don't know how long I sat there. Emotions changed within me like the carriages of a train passing through an intersection. At one moment, I was seething with rage. The next, I was remembering happy moments and was filled with sadness. I told myself that I treated her like a queen, then asking myself what I did to push her away. "I'm better off without her," I repeated until I sank into loneliness. The ringing of my cell phone took me by surprise, and I quickly answered. Subconsciously, I think I was hoping to hear Melanie's voice, but it was Penny. "How are you, Michael?" she asked. "Not really," I replied. "She's gone." "I heard," she said. "Did you hear?" I asked in amazement. "Where? How?" "I'm sorry, Michael," she said sadly. "Frank brags about it at the club." Oh, damn, I thought. It's already started. On Sunday, I called the captain of our men's team. I didn't want to go there. "Sorry, Joe, you'll have to cross me off your list for today. I have personal problems that need to be resolved." "Yes, I heard," he said sympathetically. "It's a pity. Good luck, guy." I thanked him, but I knew there was only more trouble ahead. I spent all day at home. I think I was hiding, although it pained me to admit it. There were sports programs on TV, but I didn't pay attention to them. My thoughts kept returning to my marriage to Melanie. Where did it all go wrong? When did she stop loving me? I was sure she loved me when we got married right after college. We dated throughout our senior year. I asked her to marry me during the Christmas holidays. She was a physical education and health major, and every time my fraternity friends saw her in gym clothes, they would make fun of me. She had a combination of cuteness, fit, and sexiness that was irresistible. I gave up as soon as I met her. We settled into family life easily. I found a great job in Atlanta, and she became an aerobics instructor. After a few years, we had saved enough money for a down payment on a house and found exactly what we were looking for in a new apartment complex called Eden Point. I thought we were really happy here at Eden Point. I received several promotions at work, and Melanie decided to start her own business. By that time, we had enough money to rent a room for her studios in one of the small shopping centers in the area, and her business was going very well. Growing up, we had a ton of friends and acquaintances, especially in Eden Point, and we even started discussing the possibility of starting a family in a year or two. Our sex life died down a little, but that didn't surprise me. My job was time-consuming, and doing polites every day would tire anyone out. Looking back, I'm starting to realize that things have really slowed down in the last 6 months, although I didn't notice it at the time. I also recall that Melanie sometimes seemed distracted, as if she was in another world. But when we made love, it always felt just as good to me, and I thought Melanie felt the same. Obviously, I was wrong. I mentally kicked myself. How could I be so blind as to not notice that she was attracted to someone else? How could I not realize that she had fallen out of love with me and fell in love with Frank Calhoun? The only explanation I could find was that when you love and trust someone, you don't look for signs of betrayal and deceit. No, I thought sarcastically, you just wait until they hit you in the back of the head. On Monday, I went to work early to try to get ahead of things. Around 9 o'clock, I called my lawyer's office to try to set up an appointment. When the secretary asked about the purpose of the visit, I did not want to discuss the topic of divorce from Melanie, so I said that I needed to make changes to the will. When she came back online, she said he could see me right after lunch. When I arrived at his law office, Jonathan met me in the lobby. We were classmates as students, and I turned to him when Melanie and I decided to make wills. After we sat down in his office, he looked at me with concern. "Is everything okay, Michael? I heard that you need to change your will. You or Melanie aren't sick, are you?" "Thanks for your concern, Jonathan, but it's not that bad," I said. Then I handed him the papers that Melanie had given me on Saturday. He read them, shaking his head disapprovingly. When he finished, he looked up at me. "I'm really sorry to hear about this, Michael. Do you think there is a chance for reconciliation?" "Don't think. She has already moved out of our house to her new boyfriend. She said they plan to get married as soon as our divorce is completed." He shook his head. "I would never have expected this. You two seemed like the perfect couple." Then his expression changed and his voice became professional. "Given these circumstances, as your legal advisor, I recommend that you sign this agreement immediately." "So, just like that, 10 years of marriage will be erased," I said bitterly. He shook his head patiently. "In such matters, Michael, you need to stop thinking with your heart and start thinking with your head. In my opinion, Melanie made you a very generous offer, much better than you will get if you decide to fight for it. Perhaps partly her motivation is guilt, but I'm willing to bet the main reason is to give you an incentive to agree quickly so she can marry her new man. Although now it may seem that you give up. Hey, the truth is, if your marriage is truly over, this is the best deal you can get." I knew he was right. Hell, after what she did, I didn't want to stay married to her. But it still felt like she and Frank were beating me at a game I didn't even know existed. Jonathan's tone became sympathetic. "Listen, Michael, I know the lawyer Melanie used. If you sign, we can file this agreement with the court very quickly. This will almost certainly reinforce what she suggested. Then, if she starts to have doubts and wants to come back, and if you are ready to accept her, you will still have 30 days to withdraw the divorce." I knew this wouldn't happen. "Can I have your pen?" I asked. When I returned to the office, I headed straight to the HR department. I needed to make a lot of changes to my health insurance, 401k plan, and a lot of other spousal benefits. The clerk who helped me must have done this often because he quickly found all the forms I needed. While I was signing them, I noticed that he was looking at me. I guess now I won't have to make an announcement in the office, I thought ironically. On my way home that evening, I stopped at a nearby restaurant and picked up dinner to go. But when I returned home, I discovered that Melanie had been here during the day and had packed everything she wanted. Of course, all her makeup was gone, but I was surprised to find that a few items of clothing remained. However, when I examined them, I realized that they were items that she no longer wore. I think I have to take them to Goodwill, I thought gloomily. Further inspection revealed that the bedroom was not the only place she had ransacked. Gone were our good dishes and most of the serving items we received as wedding gifts. Several cutlery and our set of good cutting knives were missing from the kitchen. Several pieces of furniture were missing, and when I went into the living room, I saw that most of our CD and DVD collection had also disappeared. When I went through our things, I noticed that the wedding album remained untouched. For some reason, this seemed sadder to me than all the things she took with her. It was as if she wanted to erase any memories of her life with me. I went to the kitchen and put the food I bought in the refrigerator. After discovering her, I lost my appetite after the raid. I made a mental note to change the locks. Damn, how can you go from happily married to single in 3 days? Divorced to a man, I asked myself. Everything seemed so unfair. For the next week, I almost completely isolated myself, starting work early and leaving late every day. The rest of the time I stayed at home. It's a humiliating situation when Frank Calhoun stealing my wife was unbearable, and the fact that I couldn't do anything about it was almost unbearable. I admit that I fantasized about being attacked with a baseball bat or brass knuckles. At other times, I dreamed of assassins and car bombs. But then I returned to the real world. Do I really want to destroy my own life to get revenge on a skirt-chasing scumbag and a wife who couldn't be faithful? By Friday, I decided it was time to come out of my cocoon. I didn't do anything wrong, and I had no reason to hide. I called Penny. "Hey, partner, do we have a tennis match scheduled for the weekend?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful and positive. "Oh, Michael, I'm so glad to hear from you," she said quickly. "I thought about calling you so many times, but I thought you might want to be alone." "Thanks, Penny," I replied, softening my tone. "This week has been hard." I told her everything that happened and then asked her what was going on at Eden Point that I had missed. She hesitated for a few seconds before admitting that our situation was the main topic of discussion in the village. "You'd think they'd have something better to discuss," I said sharply. "Perhaps," Penny allowed, "but Frank and Melanie don't make it easy. They've been hanging out at the club every night since last Saturday. Frank almost openly boasts that the best man won, and Melanie hangs on him like a love-struck schoolgirl." I heard the anger in her voice. "This is just disgusting, Michael." I immediately stopped going to her Pilates classes and told her I couldn't be her friend anymore, she said. Her loyalty cheered me up a little. "What about the others, Penny? What are they saying?" I asked. "I guess that's what you'd expect, Michael. Some people are very unhappy with Frank and Melanie and try to avoid them. Then there is the group that always sticks close to Frank. They all admire his abilities, if you know what I mean. But most people just find the situation sad and awkward and try to stay away from it." Rationally, I knew that would happen, but part of me hoped that the community would tar and feather Frank and Melanie and run them out of town. But I decided not to let my disappointment stop me. "Anyway, I'm not going to hide for the rest of my life," I told Penny. "We're scheduled to play on Saturday, and if you don't mind, I'm going to go out on the court with my partner," I told her. "I'm glad, Michael," she said with feeling. "You can count on me." I deliberately arrived at the tennis courts a little late to avoid talking about topics that I did not want to discuss. It didn't help much. As I approached the tennis pavilion, I felt the eyes of my neighbors and teammates on me. I understood their curiosity, but I still hated the feeling. When she saw me, The captain of our mixed team ran up to me. "Michael, I'm so sorry. The other team made a last-minute roster change, and some matches have already started, so I can't change that. If you don't want to play, I understand." "What are you talking about, Mary?" I asked. "I don't understand." "This is Frank," she said. "You and Penny should play with Frank and his partner." Oh, damn, I thought. That's the last thing I wanted. At that moment, Penny approached, and when she realized what was happening, her face turned pale. She pulled me aside and whispered, "We don't have to do this, Michael. It's not a problem. We'll just give up and play someone else next week." "No," I said, loud enough to make Penny wince. "I'm not going to hide from this bastard for the rest of my life. I'll have to face him, and it's best to start now." Penny looked at me worriedly, but I turned to Mary. "It's okay," I said. "Penny and I are here to play." It was a beating. I played worse than I had in years, and my obvious emotions also affected Penny. On the contrary, Frank was in excellent form, and his powerful shots from the service line whizzed over the net like RPG shells. To make the situation even worse, he constantly taunted me throughout the match. "Come on, Michael, you can hit harder," he shouted as I sent a weak punch, which he smashed the winner. Another time he shouted, "Your wife can hit harder." "Oh, sorry, my mistake. You don't have a wife." I was just angry. To top it all off, our match attracted a crowd, and I saw Melanie standing by the fence. In her defense, she did wince at some of Frank's comments, but she never looked in my direction. At one point, I sent a weak second serve over the net, and Frank sent it straight to Penny. The ball hit her in the shoulder and almost knocked her down. I rushed to the net with my racket ready to decapitate the bastard, but Penny grabbed my arm and begged me not to go after him. "It was a fair shot," she said. "I'm fine, I wasn't hurt. It's just part of the game." I looked at him with venom in my eyes as he pretended to tie his shoelaces. Finally, I returned to my position in anger and frustration. The final score was 6-2, 6-1, a humiliating defeat. Gritting my teeth, I walked up to the net to shake hands with our opponents. Frank's partner seemed embarrassed by his behavior and apologized to me as she shook my hand. However, Frank just walked up to us and, without even bothering to shake our hands, said, "It was fun. Let's do it again when you want to get slapped again." He then deliberately turned around, walked over to Melanie, and kissed her through the fence. I don't know what Penny saw on my face, but she grabbed my hand and led me off the court. "He's trying to provoke you, Michael. He would like you to start a fight with him. Don't give in to his provocations. Please, for my sake." I sat down in the stands, and someone handed me a glass of ice water. I took a few sips and then poured the rest over my head. I couldn't feel worse than I did that day. I apologized to Penny for my poor performance, and although she protested, I got in the car and drove home. After throwing my clothes into the laundry basket, I climbed into the shower and let the water flow over me for half an hour. When the water finally turned cold, I got out, dried myself off, and flopped down on the bed, angry and disappointed. I knew why I lost. I let Frank get to me. This realization only made my condition worse. He got me, and he got Melanie too, although obviously in a different way. However, the result was the same. Turn a loser like Frank into a big winner. I swore to myself that I would no longer tolerate bullying from Frank, and from Melanie too. I'll find a way to turn things around. Now I just had to figure out how to do it. I lay down on the bed and remembered the words of my old tennis coach. Play on the opponent's weaknesses. This sounded good in theory, but how do you apply it in this situation? I know myself. When I start working on a problem, my brain continues to process it, even while my mind is busy with other tasks. In fact, I have often found that if I leave a problem for a while, when I return to it, the solution becomes obvious. And that is exactly what happened in this case. I thought about this task for a while and then abandoned it, spending most of Sunday catching up on chores around the house. By nightfall, I was so tired that I fell asleep without any problems. When I arrived at work the next day, I had a possible idea. This will probably be expensive, I thought. but if it works, it'll be worth it. Around mid-morning, I called one of our top salespeople. "Hey, Jerry," I said when I got through to him. "Any chance you could have lunch with me today? I'll treat you." Of course, Michael, especially if you're paying. We met at a bar and grill I know. It's a little shabby, but the food is great. After we ordered, Jerry looked at me. "Hey, Michael, I'm really sorry to hear about you and Melanie. I thought you were doing well." "Yeah, me too, Jerry, me too. But actually, that's why I wanted to talk to you." "Of course, Michael, I'll be happy to help in any way I can." "Okay, Jerry, here's my question. When you're entertaining your best clients, have you ever had to use the services of escort girls?" He looked at me strangely. "No, Michael, absolutely not. It's against corporate policy, and I would never do it." I leaned towards him. "Jerry, this is not a corporate issue, and we are not at work. It's strictly personal, if you know what I mean." He looked at me for a few seconds, then it dawned on him. "Oh, I see," he said. "I think you've been on a break for a long time, since your wife left and you've been out of the game." He stopped, then leaned closer to me. "Of course, I know one of the best services in the city. But listen, Michael, they only serve the most important clients, okay? Their girls are incredible, but I think it might not be for you." I smiled at him. "Do not worry about it. Just tell them how to contact them and what to expect." And over burgers and beer, he did just that. I was nervous that day, reviewing the notes I had made during lunch. I hoped I was doing the right thing. Then he remembered Frank's taunts and Melanie's cold announcement that she was leaving, and decided to go all the way. I called the number Jerry gave me, and a pleasant male voice answered. "Hello? How can I help?" "Yes, I would like to speak with Mr. Henry Miller," I said, as instructed. "This is Mr. Miller," the voice answered. "How can I help you?" "Looking for something from Grove Press," was my response. "State your name, sir." I considered using a pseudonym, but Jerry was very clear about using his real name. "They are always afraid of the police," he told me. "They'll go to great lengths to make sure you're not a cop trying to set them up." I said my real name. "Are you calling from the office?" asked Mr. Miller. "Yes," I replied. "But this is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with my company." "I understand, sir. Now give your office central line number." "Of course," I said. "But wouldn't it be better to give me my direct number?" "No," he replied. "I'll call the central line and please connect with you. Then we can take your case." Pretty smart, I thought. If he calls and an operator answers, he will know he is calling a real company and not a police station. And if she connects him with me, he will know that I really am an employee of the company. It's not flawless, but it's pretty good. I gave him the central line number, and he hung up immediately. A couple of minutes later, my phone rang, and the operator transferred the call to me. It was Mr. Miller. He then asked for my mobile number. "This will allow us to contact you outside of business hours if necessary," he explained. After I gave it, he continued. "Now that we've sorted out the identification," he said smoothly, "tell us how our service can help you." "I'm looking for a very special companion who will be available for a series of events that could stretch over a month or longer." Said the voice. "It's a little unusual. We don't usually make such long-term commitments. We can try to help you, but it will be expensive." He named the price, which made my eyes pop out of my head. I swallowed. "It will be okay, Mr. Miller." "Okay, do you have any special requirements?" "Yes," I said. "She must look like a goddess." He laughed. "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, sir. But I think you can find a companion who will be to your liking." He made a pause. "Do you have a pen handy?" When I assured him that I had it, he dictated the address of their website. When I recorded it, he amusedly informed me that when prompted for a username, I should enter Anais Nin. He then gave me a numeric password. "Please understand, sir, that your username and password will change after you make your selection. This is for your safety and ours." When I confirmed my understanding, he continued, "Now regarding the payments, sir, once you have made your selection and the appointment has been made, your credit card will be charged the amount we agreed upon. Additionally, we expect our clients to show their appreciation to our female companions. If everything is satisfactory, we recommend a tip of 25%. I did some quick math. This should work, I thought. Otherwise, I will remain not only humiliated, but also ruined. Yes, sir. Once you're ready to make your choice, head over to our website. There you can make all other arrangements. All the best, sir." At this point, the line was cut off. I waited until the evening to go to the website Henry gave me. The main screen identified itself only as Capricorn Services with the slogan, "Meeting the needs of the most discerning customers." The username and password Henry gave me allowed me to log into the site, and a picture appeared on the screen that could have been taken straight from a Victoria's Secret catalog. The photographs showed women of such beauty that I wondered why they did not model but worked in this business. In fact, I even wondered if these photos were copied from some modeling site as part of some kind of scam. But my friend Jerry assured me that Capricorn was a real company, so I decided to take a chance. I assumed I'd target blonde, but a photo of a woman with shoulder-length dark hair caught my eye, and I impulsively clicked on Rhiannon. The confirmation that appeared on my screen assured me that Rhiannon would contact me within 24 hours to arrange our meeting. I was then asked to enter my credit card information. After checking the card number and expiration date, the screen went dark, and I was suddenly thrown out of the site. Out of curiosity, I tried to return to the Capricorn site, but the welcome screen no longer recognized the username and password, and after a second attempt, I was thrown back to the main page. I was impressed by the level of security of their system and decided that this was a good sign. If they take these precautions, maybe their service really is as good as Jerry said. The next day I was nervous, waiting for a call from Rhiannon. At some point, I even thought about refusing the deal. My plan was very expensive, and there was no guarantee of its success. But when I went into the break room for a cup of coffee, two secretaries who had been talking before I arrived immediately fell silent and turned away from me. It didn't take a genius to figure out who the topic of their conversation was. The pain of being the target of office gossip strengthened my resolve. No matter what, I wasn't going to remain a helpless victim if I could help it. Just after dinner, my cell phone rang, and when I answered, a melodious voice said, "Hi, Michael, this is Rhiannon. I look forward to our meeting." I swallowed and responded by suggesting that we meet for dinner to discuss my request. When she agreed, I suggested the same grill where I had lunch with Jerry. It was small, dark, and far enough from Eden Point that I was unlikely to run into one of my neighbors. She laughed. "How interesting. I don't think I had the pleasure of dining there. I look forward to seeing you there." With these words, she hung up. Here we go, I thought. The grill wasn't very crowded on a weeknight, which was one of the reasons I chose it, and the low lighting also suited my purposes. But when she walked through the door, it was as if a spotlight was shining on her. She saw me stand up nervously and came over, confidently shaking my hand. "Hi, Michael," she said in her musical voice. "Nice to meet you in person." She sat down and I followed her. I must have been staring at her because she laughed and said, "Well, what do I look like?" We've all seen movie actresses on the big screen or models in magazines. They are beautiful, but not real. But now I have met one of them in person, and the impression was overwhelming. The young woman sitting across from me was absolutely stunning. The dark eyes, the high cheekbones, the full lips, the way her hair framed her face, her athletic yet feminine figure, I could go on, but the fact remained that for several moments I just stared at her in silent admiration. She smiled and broke the silence. "I take it as a sign of approval," she said. "Oh yeah, sorry," I stuttered. "Just for a moment this." My voice trailed off in embarrassment. Luckily, at that moment the waitress came over to take our order. I don't even remember what I ordered, but Rhiannon chose a green salad with dressing on the side. As the waitress wrote down her choices, I noticed that she, too, was fascinated by Rhiannon. She continued to stare at her until she finally blurted out, "You're not on television." Rhiannon smiled sweetly at her. "No, I'm afraid not," she said, and the waitress walked away, muttering something under her breath. Their little exchange allowed the rational part of my brain to turn on again. I looked at Rhiannon curiously. "This probably happens to you often." She nodded without embarrassment. "Yes, this happens quite often." "May I ask you a question? Why aren't you on TV or modeling instead of, I asked, stumbling a little at the end. "I checked it out," she admitted, "but it's a very cruel world. I may look good to you, but I'm just one of many in this world. The chances of success are about the same as a basketball player getting into the NBA. But in this profession, I stand out. And unlike modeling or acting, I didn't have to starve for years paying off my debts. From day one, I made a lot of money. By the time my looks start to fade, I will have saved enough to live off my investments for the rest of my life. And if I'm really lucky, I'll find a rich man who wants a trophy wife and won't care about what she used to do." I couldn't help but nod. I didn't agree with the career she chose, but she certainly approached it wisely. At this point, the waitress brought our dinners. After she served Rhiannon, she looked at her again and said, "Are you sure you're not on TV? I'm just sure I've seen you before." Rhiannon shook her head. "Don't think. If I were, I would remember it." I tried to hold back my laughter as the waitress hurried away. When we started eating, she looked at me carefully. "So, Michael, why don't you tell me what's on your mind?" Henry hinted that this was something unusual. I blushed and started telling her my story. When I recounted my conversation with Melanie after I caught her and Frank in bed, Rhiannon looked at me sympathetically. "It was pretty cold," she said. When I described Frank Calhoun and his behavior, she nodded in understanding. "I've met a lot of people like him." She carefully wiped her mouth and folded her hands on the table. "So what exactly do you want to do, and how do I fit into it?" I spent the next 15 minutes describing what I hoped to achieve in the next month or so. When I finished, I admitted that I had a lot of doubts about what I was trying to do. "But I just can't sit back and let the two of them trample me without a fight. And now that I've met you, I'm starting to think it might work." She smiled widely. "What a nice compliment," she said. Then she leaned across the table. "You know, I think I'll like it." "Great," I said enthusiastically and extended my hand to seal the deal. She laughed and shook my hand firmly in response. "For partners in crime," she said with a sly smile. Then she sat down and did something that I didn't quite catch, and suddenly she was radiating raw sexuality. "Well," she said in a low, sexy voice, "now that we've finished the business portion of our meeting, can we move to a more intimate location for the recreational portion?" My mouth suddenly went dry and I had to take a sip of water before I could speak. "No," I said, "tonight should just be an orientation session." She gave me a crooked smile. "You don't find me attractive?" "Oh God, no," I stuttered. Yes. That's not the point. I'm just trying to focus on what we're planning to do, and it would be better for me not to get involved with you like that, But I have an extra one for you." With these words, I handed her the envelope. I had previously put several large bills in it. She took it solemnly, and it disappeared into her purse. Then she changed her position again, and her sexuality seemed to recede. "I think maybe I understand you, Michael." She tilted her head slightly to look at me. "You are a very interesting person. I think I'll enjoy our little adventure." With these words, she got up and left, and I remained sitting in the booth. For some reason, I felt exhausted. What a woman, I thought. We have scheduled Phase I of Operation Honey Trap to begin shortly after lunch on Saturday. Temperatures were already rising in Atlanta, and I figured the pool at Eden Point would be crowded. I was a little nervous about whether Rhiannon would show up, but shortly after noon, a BMW Z4 pulled into my driveway. She came to my door with a small bag, and when I raised my eyebrows, she said, "My swimsuit." She looked around and smiled. So this is what suburban life is like. Do you like it here? I frowned. I liked it before. She patted my cheek. We'll fix it. We separated at the clubhouse to go to the locker rooms and change into swimsuits. As agreed, I went out first and found two sun loungers next to a table with an umbrella. I had barely gotten comfortable when I noticed Big Frank Calhoun heading towards us. "Well, Michael," he said loudly, "I'm surprised to see you at the pool today. I thought you would be taking lessons from a professional, trying to improve your tennis game." I knew he was trying to tease me, but I answered him evenly. "No, today my girlfriend and I are going to enjoy the pool and get some sun." Frank wasn't going to let me off that easily. "Oh, you have a girlfriend now. I would like to meet her." By this time, our conversation had attracted the attention of people nearby. This suited me quite well. "Well, Frank, you're in luck. Here she comes," I said, pointing to the door of the women's locker room. Oh my God. Silence fell over the club members as Rhiannon approached us. I expected her to be in a bikini, but to my surprise, she was wearing a one-piece swimsuit. But somehow it was even more tempting. It was made of some silvery material that caught and reflected the sun, attracting the attention of every man and woman in sight. I heard a clicking sound and realized she was wearing high heels. They made her calves, thighs, and buttocks incredibly attractive. As she came closer, I looked away from her legs and back to her swimsuit. It looked somehow different, and then I realized that it must be made of the thinnest material I had ever seen. It absolutely hugged every contour of her body, and as I looked closer it became obvious that the swimsuit had absolutely no padding. It seemed like it was painted on her body. She walked up to me and took my arm, pressing her chest against my bicep and kissing my cheek. "Oh, good, darling," she purred. "You found a place for us." Then she turned to Frank. "Who's your friend, Michael?" I looked at Frank and saw with amusement that his mouth was open as he looked at the vision before him. "Rhiannon," I said, "I want you to meet Frank. Frank, this is my friend Rhiannon." His mouth closed, and he quickly extended his hand to shake it. "Welcome to Eden Point," he said rather stately. "If there is anything I can do to help you, please don't hesitate to ask." Rhiannon smiled sweetly. "Oh, how sweet." She then turned to me and flirtatiously asked, "Is everyone here as nice as Frank?" I answered dryly, "No, Frank is unique." She smiled at him again. "Well, thank you very much for making me feel at home." As he just stood there, she looked down with a smile. "Now you can let go of my hand." "About," he said, embarrassed. "Well, I have to go. Hope to see you again, Rhiannon. I hope I see you here again." With that, he turned awkwardly and walked to the other side of the pool, repeatedly looking over his shoulder at Rhiannon. I looked in that direction and noticed Melanie sitting with her arms crossed. She looked unhappy. Rhiannon and I settled into our sun loungers. She took my hand and pulled me closer to whisper in my ear. I think it went pretty well. I squeezed her hand. "You were great," I assured her. She smiled and quickly kissed me on the lips. She then stretched out face down on the lounge chair. "Apply, am I wearing sunscreen, Michael?" As I happily complied with her request, I was sure I heard men moaning nearby. Over the next few hours, I think everyone who was at the pool that day tried to walk past us to see my new friend. What I do know is that all the members of my men's team came up, and after exchanging a few cheerful words, I introduced them to Rhiannon. She was kind to each of them, talking as if they were old friends. At one point, I leaned over and whispered in her ear, "You should get into politics." She just smiled and winked at me. "In my work, I'm just one step away from that." I laughed. When it became quieter, she leaned towards me again. "Which one?" I knew who she meant and pointed to Melanie on the other side of the pool. "Okay," she said, "leave it to me." She put on her high heels and stomped over to Melanie's side of the pool. Leaning toward the pool, she took off her shoes and then gracefully dove into the shallow water. As she surfaced, she tilted her head forward, and then quickly threw it back so that her hair formed a graceful arc above her head, fanning water into the air. I was in awe. I had seen this movement in advertising, but never in real life. It was amazing. Then, in one motion, Rhiannon gracefully climbed out of the water onto the deck. As she stood facing Melanie with water running down her body, she raised her hands to push her hair back, highlighting her breasts. She then put her shoes back on, adding 4 inches to her height, and returned to where I stood, watching. I reluctantly looked away from Rhiannon and looked at Melanie. She looked at me angrily. She then turned and spoke sharply to Frank before grabbing her things and heading towards the exit. He followed her, looking back at Rhiannon. She gracefully settled on a chaise longue with her eyes closed. I barely heard her mutter, "Mission accomplished." The only bad thing that happened while we were there happened as we were getting ready to leave. I looked up and saw Penny walking towards me. Oh crap, I thought. I completely forgot about Penny's women's team match today. What should I tell her? "Hi, Michael. I'm so glad to see you again. Maybe we can play again." She stopped abruptly as Rhiannon stood up and took my arm. "Oh," said Penny in surprise. "Who is that?" This is Rhiannon, my girlfriend," I answered awkwardly. Penny blinked and looked at Rhiannon silently for a moment. Then she extended her hand. "I'm Penny," she said. "Nice to meet you." She turned to me again. I need to get myself organized. I'm pretty dirty after our match today. See you, Michael." She then quickly walked away before I could say anything. "Who was that?" Rhiannon asked curiously. "It was Penny Pennington," I answered. "She's my mixed couples partner." "Interesting," was her response. I mentally kicked myself for not thinking ahead about what to do with Penny. I didn't want to risk revealing my plan, but I also didn't want Penny to get it wrong. Crap. Soon after, Rhiannon and I decided it was time to leave. I felt like we achieved everything we wanted to do today. As we left the pool area, I swore I heard the level of conversation increase noticeably. When we got back to my house, I let Rhiannon use my shower while I dried off and thought about my day. With the exception of the unexpected meeting with Penny, everything went even better than I could have hoped. I showed Melanie that I was not going to sit and mourn her passing for the rest of my life. Moreover, I showed her that she was replaceable and that I had found someone much better. Let him think about it now, I thought triumphantly. "Do you think it went well?" I heard a voice behind me. I turned to see Rhiannon wrapped in a bath towel. "You were great," I answered enthusiastically. "You were exactly what I wanted and more." She did something with her fingers, and suddenly the towel slid towards her feet. "Do you want to celebrate?" she asked flirtatiously. I froze, unable to breathe. Everything about her was absolutely perfect. Her breasts sat high and proud on her chest, not too large but perfectly proportional to her body. There wasn't an ounce of excess fat on her. I sighed and realized I had been holding my breath. Having collected myself, I walked up to her, bent down and handed her a towel, which she dropped. "Sorry, Rhiannon, now is not the right time." She smiled. "Okay, I was just checking." She threw the towel over her shoulder and left the room. Oh my God, I've never seen her butt before. When she returned, she was dressed and her bag was packed. I handed her a sealed envelope. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "Today was exactly what I wanted." She tilted her head again in her funny way and looked at me. "Do you want to go back to Melanie?" she asked suddenly. I shuddered. "No," I said furiously. This was not a one-time error of judgment or loss of control. She deliberately threw me away like unnecessary trash. I would never take her back under any circumstances. "I thought so," she said, "but I just wanted to know. Anyway, are we still in business for next week?" "Oh, absolutely," I said with a big smile. "This week, I specifically went to tennis training at the club. I wanted everyone to know that I'm not hiding anymore." "Glad to have you back and back in the game," said our team captain. My teammates greeted me with pats on the back and big winks. Behind me, I heard someone say, "You lucky son of a bitch." I smiled. I knew what an impression Rhiannon could make. A couple of days later, I went back to the courts for mixed doubles training, but I couldn't find Penny anywhere. Our captain said she called and said she was sick. When I got home after training, I called her immediately. "Penny, are you okay?" I asked. "It's not like you to be sick." "Oh, it's nothing serious, probably just some kind of virus going around." "Can I help you with something?" I asked. "I'll be happy to bring you something." "No," she said sharply. "I mean, thank you, but I really don't need anything. Besides, it would be better if you stayed away. I don't want you to get infected with what I have." "Okay," I said hesitantly, "but if you get worse, call me right away. I am worried about you." She made me a vague promise and then said she needed to rest, so I let her go. I did not like it. Penny had always been so healthy and energetic that the thought that something was wrong with her bothered me. And our little argument at the pool last Saturday probably didn't help either, I thought. I still couldn't tell her my plan for fear of ruining everything, but I was terrified that Penny might have misunderstood the situation. I hope she forgives me after this is all over, I thought. The next step of my plan was scheduled for the weekend. The club was hosting a potluck dinner, and Rhiannon and I were going to show up. When she arrived at my house, she was dressed completely differently than on our previous outing. "Wow, you look like you just stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine," I said, looking at her. She was wearing a casual outfit consisting of some kind of skirt, a casual jacket, and a blouse. But while it sounded ordinary, the fabrics, styling, and accessories screamed high fashion. She curtsied like a little girl. "Thank you, good sir. This is actually a new one from Nordstrom," she said. "But don't worry if you're not familiar with these brands. Today, my main target is women, and one woman in particular." "Well, I can't speak for the wives, but I think you'll still impress men," I told her sincerely. As we pulled into the parking lot in front of the clubhouse, Rhiannon turned to me and said, "We need to change tactics a little today. We need to spread out and talk to people here. This will allow me to do what I need to do." "Sounds good to me," I told her. As we walked onto the patio area for dinner, I immediately knew we were both right. Once again, most of the men openly watched as Rhiannon walked past. The wives were more reserved, but I heard more than one comment about Rhiannon's outfit that evening. Several of the bravest women made a point to ask her where she found her clothes, and Rhiannon was soon cheerfully exchanging shopping tips with them. After some chatting, we sat down together again to eat. "Any success?" I asked her quietly. "Oh, I've been very busy," she said seriously. "I've learned so much about what wives think about the situation with you, Melanie, and Frank. More importantly, I made your ex's life miserable. I also flirted quite a bit with her fiancé, and she didn't like it at all." I just smiled. It was obvious that Rhiannon knew which buttons to push. I was talking to one of my teammates when Melanie walked by and waved at me. Intrigued, I followed her to find out what she wanted. When she turned to face me, I saw that her face was red with anger. "Well, it looks like you didn't waste any time dating again," she said irritably. "I didn't know there was a mandatory waiting period," I replied sarcastically. "Yes? Well, I think you've gone way overboard with this girl, Michael. Where did you find her? I never met her when we were married." "I met her through work," I said calmly. "Well, if I were you, I'd be careful. She looks like someone you can't handle." I couldn't resist. "You're wrong, Melanie. I deal with her every chance I get." "Is that so?" she said hotly. "Well, you better keep her away from Frank." And with these words, she left. I smiled to myself. Everything was going exactly as I had hoped. At that moment, I noticed Penny with a tray of food. I knew she was on the entertainment committee, but I didn't know if she had the strength to come tonight. I ran up and grabbed her hand. She blushed when she saw me. "I'm so glad you're feeling better," I told her. "You should have called me and told me you were feeling better." "I guess I wasn't sure until the last moment, Michael. Besides, I thought you'd be here with your new girlfriend and didn't want to bother you." At that moment, Rhiannon walked by, laughing and talking to one of my teammates. "And I see I was right," Penny continued with a frown on her face. She started to walk away, but I grabbed her hand again. "Wait, Penny, we need to discuss our next match." She hesitated and then apparently made a decision. "About that, Michael, I have a lot on my plate right now, and well, I've decided to give up mixed doubles and just focus on the women's team." I was shocked. "You can't do this, Penny," I blurted out. "You are my partner. Who will I find to play with me?" Penny looked over my shoulder, and when I turned around, I saw Rhiannon standing there. "You'll find someone, Michael," Penny said. "Now please let me go. I need to get this food out." When I let go of her hand, she quickly walked away. Rhiannon took my hand and led me to an empty table. As we sat down, she leaned over and whispered, "Just so you know, this girl is in love with you." "What? No, that's crazy. She's my tennis partner. She took a pilates class with Melanie. And if I'm not mistaken," Rhiannon continued, ignoring me, "you might have a little crush on her too." "No," I objected. "You're completely wrong. She's just a good friend." "Maybe," she said skeptically. "Anyway, I think we've done all we can for today, so let's get out of here." When we returned to my house, I asked Rhiannon to tell me what happened with Melanie and Frank. She smiled with satisfaction. I went over to their food table and tried some and complimented them. Melanie was clearly not happy about my presence, but she couldn't say anything. I then told her how much I liked her outfit, and she was forced to compliment me. This gave me a chance to tell her where I bought it. I realized that she recognized the clothes and knew how much they cost. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were almost green with envy. "That looks so much like Melanie," I said. "She's really passionate about fashion and takes pride in her dress sense." At this point, Rhiannon continued, "one of the other women asked Melanie to help in the kitchen, and although she didn't want to, she had to leave me alone with Frank. After she left, I tried another portion of their dish." As she said this, Rhiannon replayed what she had done. She leaned forward and her blouse fell open, revealing her ample breasts, barely contained by her thin bra. She straightened up and smiled at me, clearly aware of the impression she had made. Once I got Frank's attention, I started flirting with him. I asked him if he played football, and it gave him a chance to show off a little. I noted how much bigger he was than you and told him that I like big men. She grinned. "Wow," I said. "No wonder Melanie was so hostile." "I do what I can," she said with apparent false modesty. "And I can't believe Frank believed you were seducing him," I added. She laughed contemptuously. "People like Frank are so narcissistic that it never even occurs to them to doubt a woman's interest. The irony is that they are usually the worst lovers." I chuckled. If Rhiannon was telling the truth, it would be fair for Melanie. I handed her the envelope. "Do you think we're ready for the next step?" I asked. "Undoubtedly. Dancing at your club will be perfect for what we have planned." Then she turned and headed towards the door. "What? Will there be any attempt at seduction today?" I asked with a smile. She smiled at me over her shoulder. "I wouldn't think so." Then she turned around and rocked her hips slightly, which sent a rush of desire through me. After she left, I opened a can of beer and sat down to think about what was happening. On the one hand, I felt very good because our honey trap plan was working. Even though Melanie didn't want me anymore, I knew she wasn't happy with how quickly I found a replacement and was even more unhappy that my replacement was much hotter than she had ever been. It was all very satisfying, but I couldn't help but feel depressed about Penny's situation. Maybe Rhiannon was right, I wondered. Could it be that I really have feelings for Penny? She liked me from the first moment Melanie introduced us. Likewise, I found her attractive, slim, athletic, and graceful, with a charming, outgoing personality. But I always tried to keep our relationship strictly within the framework of friendship and tennis partnership because of Melanie. And I was sure that Penny wanted it too, especially after she lost her husband. I thought about what Rhiannon said about Penny. This couldn't be true, could it? If Penny was interested in me, why did she avoid me like the plague? And why did this bother me so much? Moreover, Why did I constantly reject the hottest woman I would probably ever meet in my life? Could my feelings for Penny be part of this? Finally, I gave up and went to bed. I didn't know the answers to my questions, and even if I did, I still wouldn't know what to do about it. I decided that the best thing for me was to stick to the plan. The club's annual spring ball was a popular event that always attracted a large crowd. Women used the ball as an opportunity to dress up, but men were reluctant to put on their jackets. Some even wore ties. I figured Frank and Melanie would show up too. I had warned Rhiannon what to expect, and I was curious to see what she would wear to the culmination of our plan today. So I was surprised and disappointed to see her get out of her car wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Sure, they were the tightest jeans I'd ever seen on a woman, and the t-shirt hugged her breasts without a bra, but I was still expecting something different. My face must have given me away because she patted my cheek as she walked past. You didn't think I was risking my dress by driving here, did you? Let me use your bedroom for a little while, and I'll be ready. I was already wearing a jacket and trousers, so I eagerly walked around the living room while she changed. Damn, I chuckled to myself. It's almost like we're an old married couple. A few minutes later, her voice reached me. Michael, can you come here? I need your help. I went and opened the bedroom door. Oh my God, Rhiannon stood there in the sexiest lingerie I've ever seen. Her strapless bra and panties were the same chocolate brown color, trimmed with white lace that accentuated the curve of her breasts and the sexy area between her legs. Her stockings were the same deep brown color and were held in place by garters, drawing attention to her most private parts. She took a half step in her stilettos and turned around to reveal that her panties were actually a thong, revealing the full cheeks of her buttocks. She turned to face me. "Will I come?" she asked with a small smile. I couldn't help myself. I took a step towards her, but she stopped me with a smile and a raised hand. "No, no, not now. I can't let you ruin this. Now that I have your approval, get out of here and let me put on the dress." I think I swayed as I walked back into the living room. A few minutes later, she came out. This time, she wore a strapless dress in the same white color as the trim on her underwear. The color contrasted perfectly with her hair. As she walked across the room, I realized that the dress must have been custom-made for her because the fabric seemed to flow over her body like water. I could clearly see the outline of her hips with every step, and when she turned, her buttocks stood out clearly. The slit in the dress went all the way to the top of her stockings, and when she stood a certain way, her perfect leg was revealed to devastating effect. Of course, my blood pressure didn't improve because I knew what she was wearing under her dress. I swallowed. "I think you might cause a few heart attacks tonight," I told her, and it wasn't a joke. She simply smiled at me and held out her hand so I could walk her to the door. At the dance, the club's patio area was cleared and paper lanterns were hung above it. It was a little cheap, but I liked the effect of the soft light and twangy music. Rhiannon clung to me to dance, and I was not surprised to find that she was a much better dancer than I was. As we moved together, she put her head on my shoulder, and at that moment I decided that I didn't care, that she was just an escort. I just enjoyed the feeling of her body next to mine and the pleasure of her company. She raised her head and leaned back to look at me. "You know, this suburban life isn't so bad. The girl could get used to it." Before I could answer, she tensed. "Oh, battle stations." I turned and saw Frank Calhoun coming towards us, clearly dragging reluctant Melanie. "Hello, Rhiannon. Hi, Michael," he said loudly. "Glad you decided to join us this evening. How about we switch partners for a couple of dances?" When I agreed, he carried Rhiannon away, leaving me with a clearly uncomfortable Melanie. I held out my hands to her. "Shall we dance for old time's sake?" She reluctantly agreed, and when a new song started playing, we started dancing. It was an interesting experience. I loved this woman and was married to her for 10 years. But after what happened, all I was left with was a strong need to make her feel what she did to me. "Was our marriage really that bad?" I asked. She sighed. "No, Michael, it wasn't like that. We had good years and good times. But then everything became routine, and over time I stopped feeling excited about our relationship. When Frank showed up and made it obvious how much he wanted me, I just overwhelmed this. I'm really in love, Michael. It was like being in college. She looked at me. I didn't want to hurt you, Michael, but I had to do what was right for me. Can you understand this? I understand, I said bitterly. You have decided to climb the social ladder. I didn't mean it like that, she said defensively. It's okay, I said. I also found someone better. She winced as she remembered who I was now dating, and I felt a certain satisfaction. If everything goes according to plan, it will only get better. I looked up and saw Frank and Rhiannon walking towards us, arm in arm. Here's your date, Michael, Frank said with a slight grin. Good evening. He then walked away, leaving Melanie trying to keep up. Rhiannon and I started dancing again. How did everything go? I whispered in her ear. I could almost hear the smile in her voice. The hook is secure, she said. He is convinced that I am in love with him. He's going to come up with an excuse for Melanie, and we'll meet at the club after everyone leaves. I'm a little nervous about it. The timing must be perfect, I told her. You just leave it to me. Women know how to deal with these things. As the evening progressed, I noticed that people began to leave quite quickly. I think I must have been looking around because Rhiannon caught me. Sorry, Michael, she said. I guess Penny didn't come today. Am I that transparent? I asked her. Like glass, she said with a small smile. When we got back to my house, I reached into my pocket and handed Rhiannon another envelope. I may not have a chance to give this to you later, I told her, and I wanted to make sure you got it. She took it almost reluctantly, it seemed to me. She looked at me for a moment, and then her face changed. The sexy goddess disappeared, leaving behind a real, albeit still beautiful, woman. This was the most unusual assignment I've ever had, she said, and you're unlike any other client I've ever met. It was a little disappointing at times, I blushed, but I had a lot of fun. I took her hands in mine. When I decided to take revenge, I knew I needed someone with admirable qualities, I replied. But I never expected to find someone like you, and I will never forget you. I suddenly stepped forward and kissed her. She blinked her eyes quickly a few times and then hurriedly said, No need to ruin your lipstick. Then she glanced at her precious watch and added, It's almost time, we have to go. Give me exactly 30 minutes. With these words, she walked out the door, got into the car, and drove away. I stood there for a minute and then made a decision. Rhiannon and I hadn't discussed it, and I was hoping I wouldn't screw it up, but I had to take the risk. I took out my mobile phone. She must have gotten my number. Michael, why are you calling at this hour? Penny, I'm going to ask you for the biggest favor of my life. Please, please don't ask questions. Just meet me at the club in 30 minutes. What's going on, Michael? What is this all about? Please, Penny, I begged. I don't have time to explain. Please trust me. Just come back in 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I have to go. I hung up. As I walked towards the clubhouse, I wondered if she would come. The chance was slim, but I thought it was the only chance I had. When I reached the parking lot, there were 2 cars parked there. I took out my cell phone again and made another call. Frank, came Melanie's angry voice through the phone. Where are you? It's not Frank, I said. It's Michael. Michael, what do you need and why are you calling so late? She demanded. I'm calling because I know where Frank is. He's with Rhiannon. What? She screamed. Where are they? Look, I said. Just meet me at the clubhouse as quickly as possible. Then I hung up. Frank's house was a few blocks from the clubhouse, but she must have been sprinting because I soon saw her run through someone's backyard. I intercepted her before she reached the clubhouse. Where is he? She got angry. Quiet, I ordered, grabbing her wrist. You have to be quiet so we can catch them. I led her to the clubhouse door, which was unlocked, and we tiptoed across the threshold. As we entered the living room, we heard whispers and the rustling of clothes. In the dim light coming through the windows, I saw Melanie's eyes widen. Quickly, I covered her mouth with my hand to keep her quiet, and then pointed to the light switch on the wall. She nodded in understanding, and we tiptoed towards him. I turned on the light, and the room instantly filled with light. With the start, Frank tried to jump up, but with his pants around his knees, he tripped and fell to the floor. He jumped up again, frantically pulling on his trousers. Behind him, Rhiannon jumped up from the sofa on which she had been lying. Her dress was draped over the back of the sofa, and she stood up and pulled her bra over her chest. She stood there in her provocative underwear, and there was no doubt about what was happening. I was holding Melanie when she started screaming at Frank. "You bastard! How could you do this to me? We must get married." Rhiannon clung to Frank's arm, hiding behind him in the face of Melanie's wrath. Now that his pants were in place, Frank regained his confidence. He gave me a bold look and then turned to Rhiannon and asked her, "What do you want to do now, baby?" "Oh, Frank," she replied in a childish voice, "I just want to be with you." Clinging close to him, he hugged her protectively. Then he turned to us. Despite Melanie's suffering, his first words were addressed to me. "Well, Michael, it looks like you've lost a woman again." I didn't say anything, but Melanie screamed. "What about me, Frank? What about us?" The big man turned to her. "Listen, Melanie, we had a good time, but it would never last. Now I've found someone better, and I'm going to devote all my time to her." He looked at Rhiannon and then turned back to Melanie. "You can't blame a man for wanting to take things to a higher level, right?" Even in her anguish and anger, Melanie couldn't help but give me a guilty look when she heard those words. Rhiannon turned and quickly put on her dress. Then she put her arms around Frank's neck again. He leaned over and kissed her. "Come on, baby, let's get out of here," he said, pulling her toward the door. "You go ahead, Frank," she said. "I need to tell Michael something. Besides, I don't want to leave my car here. Meet me at this bar." She took a piece of paper from her purse and quickly wrote down the address. "I'm right behind you, darling," she added. He looked at her doubtfully. "Are you sure everything will be okay?" he asked. "I'm sure, dear. Michael won't hurt me. He's not that kind of person." "Yeah," Frank chuckled. "I think you're right." With these words, he walked out the door, and we heard him drive away. While our attention was focused on Frank, Melanie managed to escape my grip. She screamed, "Bitch," and rushed at Rhiannon with outstretched claws. Instead of flinching, Rhiannon stood calmly in place. As Melanie ran up to her, Rhiannon took a quick step to the side, grabbed one of Melanie's outstretched arms, and deftly twisted it behind her back. She winked at me. I knew self-defense lessons would come in handy. When Melanie continued to struggle, Rhiannon said sharply, "If you don't calm down, I'll be forced to dislocate your shoulder." Melanie stopped struggling and Rhiannon released her, turning her to face her. "Listen, Melanie, there are a few things you need to know," she said. "I don't give a damn about your Neanderthal ex-fiancé, and I have absolutely no intention of meeting him at the bar he's headed to." Melanie was stunned. "But why then?" "Why did I seduce him? Because this is my profession. I am a paid companion. I've been with dozens of people like Frank. They all think they are God's gift to women and are always looking for their next catch. Do you think he loved you? The only thing he really loved was the opportunity to finally beat Michael at something. Sure, he liked having sex with you, but he liked even more that he slept with Michael's wife. So Michael hired me to get a little revenge on Frank and at the same time show you what it's like when the person you love cheats. It hurts, right?" Melanie screamed and then lunged at me. But before I could react, a figure flashed in front of me and knocked Melanie off her feet. She sprawled awkwardly on the floor. Penny stood over her. "You deserve it, Melanie. After what you did to Michael, you deserve so much more." Melanie just lay there and started sobbing. It seemed her feelings were hurt more than her body. Penny turned to me, and I saw tears streaming down her face. "This is true?" she asked me. "She's really not your girlfriend?" "No," I answered solemnly. "She was my partner in the honey trap for Frank and Melanie, but nothing more." "But she's so beautiful," Penny countered. I can never compete with someone like her. Rhiannon walked over and put her hands on Penny's shoulders. You're stupid. I never had a chance. He only looked at you. Penny looked at me again with sparkling eyes. You never even. Rhiannon intervened again. No, Penny, he never did. I couldn't keep him from thinking about you long enough for him to pay attention to me. And believe me, I gave him the opportunity. Penny didn't say anything, but looked at me with shining eyes. Rhiannon smiled at us both. I think it's time for me to leave. I've had more difficult assignments, but it wore me down. At that moment, Melanie rose from the floor. What about me? Where should I go? I can't go back to Frank's house after all this. Penny looked at her carefully. I don't know what you will do tomorrow, but tonight you can sleep with me, and I'll go home with Michael. With these words, she kissed me deeply. I took her hand and decided not to let go. But something was bothering me, and I turned to Rhiannon. What about Frank? Where did you send him? She laughed. This was the address of a bar for gay men that I know. I wonder how long it will be before he realizes I'm not coming. Then her face lost its smile, and she looked at me seriously. Good luck, Michael. You are a special person, and I will not forget you. She leaned over and kissed me tenderly. I felt Penny squeeze my hand even tighter. Rhiannon then turned to Penny with a fierce look on her face. You have to treat him well, you know. If I ever hear that you didn't, I'll come back, and this time I won't take no for an answer. The fierce expression left her face, replaced by an expression that I later realized was sadness. She reached out and patted my cheek. But I don't think I'll be so lucky. She then slipped something into my hand from her purse. Goodbye, she said, and then turned and walked out the door, swaying her hips gracefully. I looked at my hand. It contained 4 unopened envelopes. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.